What is going on? I want to welcome you to From Half Court, Unfiltered, Uncut. I am your host, Sean Murphy, and today we got to talk about the New York Knicks, the mecca of the basketball world, the Madison Square Garden, Julius Randle, the team that everyone expected to overcome the odds, is now 12th in the Eastern Conference, 23-27, and looking like they're just a disaster. Leaving fans of the New York Knicks in the NBA like to ask what the hell happened. I mean, after all, this was a team that blew everyone's expectations away last year, and this was supposed to be different. Tom Thibodeau came in and made these guys believe in defense. They made Julius Randle the franchise player that everybody thought he could be. He overcame the odds. He won most improved player and then proved that he couldn't score with his right hand in the playoffs. Neither could RJ Barrett. Now look at they are. But hey, the New York Knicks go out and get Kemba Walker in free agency, which we forgot who Kemba Walker is apparently in free agency, because we wondered if that was going to be a big move for this team, something that could change the course of their season, something that could be an impact difference maker for the franchise. Of course that wasn't going to be the case. Are you fucking kidding me? I mean, listen, the New York Knicks, they just don't have enough offensive firepower. And on top of that, their defense is spectacular. That's something that they can do, or at least it was last year, because now when it comes to defensively, they are 11th in the league. They still have technically, just outside or about a top 10 defense. But really, defense wasn't ever going to be the issue with this team. It was always going to be their offense, because the question was, who is going to be the guy that can consistently put it up for your team? Now, Julius Randle last year obviously had a really good year, had a most improved player kind of season. He went out and averaged 24 points a game. He shot really efficiently, but the problem is that that's a lot easier to do when you don't have fans in the stands, and it's clear that Julius Randle had a really good year in part because of the fans' absence. And there was all this controversy between Julius Randle and New York, him shushing the crowd, telling him to shut up, all this kind of stuff. Listen, if you're going to be playing in the Garden, if you're going to be playing specifically in the city of New York. Now, Ben Simmons, he's going through his old tirade, everything that's happened with him. We can resurface that any single day, right? But the big reason why Philly does not love Ben Simmons right now is because of the fact that they are going to tell him like it is, and they are going to want their player to play better. And the city of New York is like the city of Philadelphia with a lot more crack. And if you give that crack to the city of New York and you let them go and you tell them to shut up or you shush them in your own game, of course this is going to happen. Of course your relationship with the city is going to blow up. Of course people are going to get upset when you're not playing up to the performance that they saw you play last year. Because here's the thing, last year is almost looking like a complete fad, because now you're just back to your career averages. You're averaging 18 points a game. You're shooting 41% from the field. That same efficiency you had from 3-point last year is completely gone. You're only shooting 30% from 3 now, when you were shooting 41%, which was pretty crucial for the Knicks and their success. When you're not hitting as many threes, when your scoring is down, when your main guy that you expect to step up isn't, this is part of what that can happen. In addition, you have guys like RJ Barrett on this team who is in year 3, a guy that you're hoping to make this step up, and he's just kind of been the same player that he has been. There's been some nights where he went out and he had some great performances, but this Knicks team in general was a lot better when the noise was gone, when they were just focusing on basketball, when the Garden wasn't filled with fans. The moment that Trae Young faced this team in the playoffs last year, ever since that moment, they have not looked the same. And look, the conversation around the New York Knicks is always weird, because people are always like, well, what's the solution? Well, we got to talk about free agency. And the reason why I really don't like starting a conversation with how to fix this roster with free agency is because you have to go with the fact that historically this team has not attracted free agents. So despite the fact that they have a really good roster, despite the fact that they are in the city of New York, they are in the biggest market in the country other than Los Angeles, they do have the Madison Square Garden and all the history with their franchise. They, in theory, a franchise that should garnish a lot of respect and a lot of free agents and a lot of attraction from other players throughout the league. Historically, this team just hasn't really gotten many stars in the past 20 years, and the ones that they have gotten have not been the marquee stars that they have been going for. Yes, they were able to trade and bring in Carmelo Anthony. Yes, they were able to get Amari Stoudemire. Yes, they got Derrick Rose outside of his prime twice. Yes, you did get Kemba Walker this offseason. However, you still haven't been able to go out and get the marquee guy that changes the culture of the league and changes your fortunes forever. I mean, let's not forget that before LeBron James went to the Miami Heat, the number one team that we talked about LeBron going to was the New York Knicks. And look how that worked out, ladies and gentlemen. Ever since, LeBron James has won multiple titles, and the New York Knicks have hardly won playoff games. So when looking at this franchise, it's really hard to really kind of judge adequately what needs to change outside of what we already know needs to change, which is the fact that outside of last year, this is a really bad run organization. They made some good moves. They made some good changes, bringing in Tom Thibodeau, a no-nonsense kind of coach that can make your team perform better on the defensive end. That's a guy that you really need to succeed with him early, because it's tougher to sell defensive intensity and playing a lot of minutes and playing on back-to-backs and pushing your players as extremely as you do. Over time, that generally doesn't get easier to sell. That only gets harder. So when looking at that, on top of the fact that this team just isn't very good, I mean, they're just in a difficult situation, because now you have guys like Obi Toppin that they're looking to trade and possibly go upgrade and get other guys. I mean, this is a team that is actively looking to buy when coming up at this trade deadline. I would imagine they're not really looking to sell, because they're not really in a situation where they're looking to rebuild again, because this was their rebuild. This soft relaunch last year, this was the catapult back into expectations as far as being a franchise that can compete. The New York Knicks are not like any other franchise where you can just call for like a traditional rebuild, because for one, when they try it, it doesn't work out well. When the New York Knicks stink, fans will tell you about it. But on top of that, you committed so heavily into this roster. I mean, you did it in a way where you're spending a lot of money in the short term. You still don't really have a lot tied up long term in the books, but you're still making it really difficult for yourselves in the long term, because I don't really see a lot of tradable contracts on this team. I mean, you have guys like Mitchell Robinson who garner some form of respect. That's a guy that other teams would be somewhat willing to trade for. You have his expiring contract. You have other guys, like you have RJ Barrett potentially, maybe. I mean, really, your best asset right now is Obi Toppin. I mean, you trade for Cam Reddish. He's hardly played ever since he's been here. Emmanuel Quickly, he's a guard that you kind of go back and forth on committing on. At the beginning of this year, you were bullish on him, but he's been struggling to get playing time. They just have a lot of young guys that still need to figure out like where exactly their placing is in the league. And so for anyone to expect this team to come into the Eastern Conference, which by the way, a lot of the teams got better, like a lot of them got better. This team wasn't going to do anything in the Eastern Conference. And if anyone fooled you otherwise, they were simply just not paying attention, or they just had rose petals in their eyes because they overachieved last year, which even then, we're talking about how great the Knicks were last year. They got to the first round and then they got their asses kicked and then they're eliminated. So to me, when I look at this situation in New York, I don't see what a lot of people see. I don't see this optimism. I don't see reason to be excited, because this to me just seems like the status quo of the New York Knicks. You bring in all of these young guys. You bring in promise. And the second that you start to show good things are happening, at that point you believe you're a legitimate franchise again. You think you're going to win. And when that seems to be happening, or when that seems to be in the beginning stages, finally something comes to fruition that just makes that not the case for them. And listen, I still like this roster. I still like a lot of the players that they have. I'm still high on guys like Emmanuel Quickley in the long run. I think R.J. Barrett can be a really good player. I think it's been pretty clear that as far as his ceiling goes, it's pretty significantly less than the other guys in that draft, which was John Morant and Zion Williamson, which, Zion, we don't even know where he is, but, I'd still take him right now over R.J. Barrett with his upside. So the New York Knicks, they're going to have a lot of decisions to make. I don't know if they're going to be making any big trades and trying to change this roster dramatically, but one thing that is clear is that whatever this Knicks team was supposed to be this year, they haven't been that. And as of right now, they're sitting on the edge of the play-in tournament. They're at 12th right now, so they would really have to do some work. And the Eastern Conference is really close. So if the Knicks somehow do not make it to the play-in tournament, that is going to be a disaster. And the teams that they're going to be competing with to get there, they have some pretty stiff competition, because not only do you have teams right now like Brooklyn who are technically in the play-in tournament picture, you have teams like Charlotte, Toronto, Boston, Atlanta, and that's it right now. If the play-in tournament was to start today, it would be Charlotte, Toronto, Boston, and Atlanta. However, you still have the New York Knicks and the Washington Wizards competing down there as well. So it's super close. It's really tight. But the thing is that if you are the New York Knicks and you fall out of this play-in picture, that's a disaster. That is an absolute disaster. So what do you think of the New York Knicks? If you were the GM, what kind of changes would you make? If you were Leon Rose, what kind of moves would you be looking to make to change up this New York Knicks roster? I never believed in it much to begin with. And even though there's some young guys I like, personally, if you really do believe in Barrett, or if you really do believe in Julius Randle and his ability and what he can do, and this is who you want to build your franchise around, I just don't think you're going to be able to get anybody that's going to be able to complement him to where you're actually going to contend and be something real. So that's just me. So right now, if I'm the New York Knicks, they're going to be looking to get a star in the next couple years. It's going to be the exact same talk about, the New York Knicks, they have salary cap space. They can finally attract all these guys to come play in New York. But that just hasn't happened. So until it actually happens, let's not believe that it will. Okay? With that, I want to thank you so much for tuning in, and we will catch you next time from Half Court. Be sure to subscribe.